I've been looking forward to this one all week, actually. A little bit nervous, though, because we've got a French football expert on the show, Tom. How are you feeling ahead of delivering our selection tonight?
Yeah, pretty similar. I think we're talking about the best French 11 ever to grace the Premier League for the listeners' benefit. A little bit nervous. I think there's going to be some no-brainer names which I think everyone will agree with. Hopefully, Matt will agree with. I think it'll be sacrilege to disagree with some of them, clearly. But I think there's going to be a bit of contention around 3 or 4 names. But there's different ways you can judge a best 11, isn't there? Is it someone who turned up for 90 minutes and was just had that ability, or is it actually going to base it on trophies or whatever else? So there's a few different reasons, weren't there, really, Andrew?
Yeah, definitely. It's I'm interested to see what your thoughts are, Matt. Big French football writer, obviously a passion of yours. Hopefully, we get the verification. You ready?
Yeah, a passion that was probably inspired, I think, by a lot of the moves across the channel in the 90s and some of the games between French teams and English teams. And of course, with Arsene Wenger, it all accelerated. But looking forward to it as well.
Right. Okay. So let's get moving with a goalkeeper. Firstly, we went for a more balanced formation, Tom, didn't we? Because we thought the biggest names don't necessarily mean that it's going to give us the best compact unit.
No, I think that's right. I think we've gone for a balanced team. There's going to be some people, some water carriers and some flair players, but I think you're kicking off with a bit of a contentious selection. So we'll see what we think about, and we'll discuss that player for a little bit.
Well, the much maligned Fabian Barthez has got the job between the sticks. I mean, we were umming and ahhing between Barthez and Lloris for a while, Matt, and I think coming over from Monaco in 2000 and winning 2 league titles with Manchester United, I think probably tipped it in terms of Premier League impact that he's had. But obviously a very mixed bag is probably being quite kind. He was trying to fill some big gloves, wasn't he, with Peter Schmeichel leaving. They sort of tossed and turned with, was it Bosnich and I think Taibbi for a season or so. But what do you make of that selection? Is it a no-brainer or is it quite harsh on Lloris?
No, I don't think you should be too nervous or worried about it. I mean, Fabian Barthez has, it's fair to say his reputation is far bigger over here in France, because he won the Champions League with Marseille, and of course he won the World Cup, and was quite a symbolic figure, and not just because of Laurent Blanc kissing him on his head. He had some great moments and some great times with the French national team. And I think he was a great goalkeeper. I think there's no question about that. We saw it at Manchester United. We didn't see it all the time. And that's why, I think you rightly have some doubts, because he had quite a few shaky moments. And I think Arsenal fans will cherish one of his performances at Highbury when Arsenal turned it round at the end. With a couple with some of their French players as well. And Barthez had a bit of a nightmare in the last 10 minutes. But look, overall, I would say definitely there's no question that Lloris is the guy who pushes him quite close. And I think Lloris, again, has a better reputation over here than he does over in England. He's obviously considered one of the better goalkeepers in the Premier League. He's Tottenham captain, France captain, or Tottenham captain when Harry Kane's not there, I guess. Yeah. So he was for a while last season. But in terms of trophies, I'm happy to go along with your selection. And I think Lloris has probably been as error prone as Barthez, but equally has been very influential as well. Because Lloris's game isn't just about sort of making saves on his line. He plays very much as a sort of a sweeper keeper, and he's important as well. He's been important, I think, in Tottenham's rise. Under Pochettino, at least. Yeah,
I think that's fair, and I think goalkeepers, they're there to be poked fun at when there's a big error, and I think that's what happened with Barthez towards sort of the latter end of his Manchester United career. But I think the 2 titles edged it. I think Lloris has had a fantastic run at Spurs, but you could argue the same thing's kind of happening there over the last sort of year, after being so consistent for so many years with Tottenham. Actually, he made a couple of errors last season, and actually people are very quick with a goalkeeper. So, who would want to be a goalkeeper? They always say, don't they? Because they're very quick to jump on them when they make an error or two. But goalkeepers.
I wanted to butt in, because you're right. I think with goalkeepers, perceptions can change really quickly, and they can be influenced as well by what people think and what the press are writing. And over here in France, it is very different because ever since I've been here for 18 years now, and there's always been this running joke in France about English goalkeepers. They think it's hilarious how awful English goalkeepers are. And actually, the French haven't been that flushed with brilliant. You know, this is the one position probably where we're thinking, oh, you know, have we got the greatest player in goal? And I'm trying to think who else. You know, the Guillaume Varma's played in the League Cup for Arsenal. Steve Mandanda came, had a brief spell. He's a really good keeper, but it didn't work out for him at Crystal Palace. But you know, they're always going on about how great the keepers are over here in France. But then I say to people, well, then why are the Premier League clubs not buying Stéphane Ruffier and Steve Mandanda? And yeah, anyway, it's one of those where I see people like mocking Lloris for a mistake, but over here it's kind of very much the opposite. When an English goalkeeper makes a mistake, it's all over French TV.
Yeah, I think as well what swayed it was the short sleeve shirts as well.
Yes.
Well, that's going to help. I'm going to go with a safer choice because I still feel that the Bartes choice will be a bit contentious. But defence, left back, this is one of our no-brainers. It's got to be Evra, given sort of his run. You know, with Man United, 5 league titles, sort of I think it's 270 odd performances plus that we found. There's no contention there, really, is there? I mean, obviously, as an Arsenal fan, you know, he's unfortunate to be in the same Premier League era as Ashley Cole, with an Arsenal and Chelsea decade of brilliance as the best left back in the world.
Yeah, he liked winding Arsenal up. When I went to interview him when he was in Marseille, and I said, you know, I had a bit of an Arsenal background, and he sort of looked at me, and goes, "Yeah, they were my boys. They were my boys." I was just like, "No, shut up, mate, shut up." But yeah, he, you know, if he plays for your team. The way he performed in the big games, you know, the bigger the rivalry, he's a real competitor. And you know, I'd actually say the opposite to Bartes. He's got a reputation issue over here in France. Obviously, there's been problems linked with the French national team, and his personality hasn't always gone down well. But yeah, Man United, he's proper legend status.
Yeah, and the Champions League winners' trophy as well. 5 epic appearances for West Ham at the end of his career.
Don't discount them. Don't discount them.
All count, don't they?
All count towards the total. I'd take 5 appearances for West Ham. Just maybe not this West Ham. Just like a bit of.
Yeah, I think the other fullback position though was a bit of a tricky one because we've gone for a 4 at the back, Matt, and we landed on
sensible. I would say you don't want to take too many places with defenders, given the attacking talent we've got.
Yeah, exactly. I think we fell on Arsenal and Man City's Bakary Sagna. Joined from Auxerre back in 2007. I mean, Tom and I always talk about the 07-08 season being probably the last time Arsenal. I mean, we came close with the Welbeck header against Leicester that season, but 07-08 was a genuine title charge. I mean, it ended sort of late Feb, early March, but Bakary Sagna was a summer signing that year.
Yeah, and we still only finished 3 points adrift. We had a very good overall team that year.
Yeah,
and he was a stalwart for us for many years before he went to Man City.
Yeah,
I agree. And I think, you know, people talk about Arsenal losing Nasri, Fabregas, Van Persie and stuff like that. But Sagna is the sort of guy, he was disappointed with Arsenal's, let's say, lack of ambition, just, you know, with the fact that they weren't investing in the team. And he got frustrated. He wanted to be winning trophies, and that he was the sort of character that you need in a football club, definitely. And really good servant for Arsenal. Got some trophies at City. Again, what's the competition? I'm just trying to think of it.
Yeah, I was thinking of what would be your options there.
Well, one of our centre-back choices could have arguably played, and he did play at right back for many occasions. So and left back. So we have plumped for William Gallas. Now centre-back, I think centre-back is a very interesting discussion because there's a few great names there, but then it comes in and it's probably our first example of achievements in the Premier League versus brilliance elsewhere. And there's a lot of players who potentially don't make our 11 later who, had they spent longer of their primes in the Premier League, absolutely would have done. But I think the reason we went for Gallas is that he spent the predominant of his prime career in England. He went on, won 2 league titles, tantrums on the pitch if you're an Arsenal fan, but also those 2 league titles at Chelsea, part of one of the best teams the country's seen in that first Mourinho reign. I think for us that tipped the balance. But maybe it's better to then give the other centre back and then look at them as a pair and look at the ones we've left out. Maybe.
I've got the harder argument, I think. Then, I mean,
Ish, I've got
thought,
something ready to back it for you.
Well, I thought Gallas for me was the first centre back down on the team sheet, but then we were umming and ahhing. It was, to be honest, it was between Desai and Laporte, and overall, like Tom has mentioned there, in terms of like maybe greatness elsewhere and as a career, then Desai, of course, but we don't know what Laporte's going to go on to achieve. But we went for Laporte, back-to-back league titles with City. I know that's a majority of that alongside the great Vincent Kompany, but I just feel that he's probably one of the most talented centre-backs the league has had actually in the last 5, 6, 7 years. I know he's not a regular for France, Matt, at the moment, is he? Or
not at all. Not at all.
No, I mean,
and before Matt therefore jumps in and disagrees because he's clearly primed. What I would say is that for me,
they've got
the
some
Man
good
City
ones,
side, the Man City side of 2 seasons ago that got 100 points. I will forever bat for the Invincibles, but that's up there with the very, very best teams the country's ever seen. The brand of football that Man City played, the points they scored, and the difference with his big injury last year in City was phenomenal. You could see that the drop in their level of play, and so for me, that's what edged it in terms of how important he was to a team that was so talented, despite being a defender. But look, it's contentious. I think there's a few good names there. Who would make your back to, Matt?
There are some good names, and what you were saying before, somebody like Laurent Blanc. I guess you wouldn't consider in terms of his career. Man United wasn't necessarily the highlight. That wasn't necessarily his prime. Well, it certainly wasn't. Desai, though, I mean, overlooked Desai for Emery Laporte. I've got a bit of trouble there, but the guy I'm surprised. It'd be interesting to shame we haven't got any City fans to talk to, but Sylvain Distin is the guy who's played more Premier League games than any other Frenchman. And I had a hunch that you might have gone for him on certain criteria. We know that Laurent Blanc, Marcel Desailly better defend, better centre-backs than Sylvain Distin, but in terms of the service he gave, was it Everton, City, Portsmouth, played loads of games. It just was a really good defender, was really solid throughout. But yeah, okay, I'll accept that Laporte is a better, more talented defender. I just think he hasn't done enough yet. And I think when you look at, you can talk about league titles, and I'm not diminishing the achievement of winning a league title with City. It's still, not easy. You've got Liverpool, you've got a lot of top teams to beat. But I just think you look at what somebody like Desai did at a stage in Chelsea's sort of development, very early stage. I think he was so important, helping Chelsea to change dimensions. And Desai would definitely be in my team. But
as a consolation, he makes our bench. Do you know what I mean? So.
And Gallas, okay, fair enough. Again, I have a bit of trouble with a guy who plays for Chelsea, Arsenal, and Tottenham. I just think taking the mickey a little bit, isn't
so do we really?
I think everyone did by the end of his period.
Yeah, but that's just the way he is. He's maybe not a guy who. I'm not saying he doesn't have any club loyalty, but he plays football as a job, and he's very, very good at it. And absolutely at Chelsea, in particular, he was huge.
And a very versatile defender as well. I think I appreciate it. It feels like it was only yesterday, but we're going 15 years ago now. But I feel like a very modern defender as well. Could play kind of anywhere across the back line. Was quick, was athletic. For me, what he would have probably done is slotted in next to Desai or whoever, a Blanc in their prime, and really done a great job there. He reminded me very much of like a Torre, for Arsenal, next to Sol Campbell, someone who just quick, athletic, does a fantastic job. Bar some sulking on the pitch towards the end of his career. For me, he was the one that was in there.
Yeah, his best period, I would say, was he played in the 2006 World Cup. He was starter alongside Thuram, who was at the end of his career but playing centre back at that point. And like you say, with Thuram's sort of experience, Gallas was just so good, so strong, so athletic, and France got to the World Cup final, and people maybe overlook, it was all about Zidane, what have you, but Gallas was one of France's stars in that tournament.
Absolutely.
I think talking of modern defenders, I think that probably was an extra weight behind the Laporte argument, wasn't it, Tom, as well? The left-footed centre-back these days, which is a very common trend. Just another reason just to drop in why we went for him.
Our team's going to run all day. I think midfield, when we get onto midfield, there'll be less. Look, I think this is less contentious because it's more like who do you like? Like there's so many top midfielders that have played here. There are some, you think about a Deschamps or a Djorkaeff who are what would be really interesting to get your take, Matt, once we reveal our names. It's kind of the reveal there that they're not in the side. That who did we kind of miss out on the most special career that if they'd spent longer in the Premier League really would have been special? Because that would be an interesting one. But do you want to kick us off with any of those midfielders that we have gone for?
Yeah, well, going to have to start off with Patrick Vieira. Makes probably any Premier League side that we would set up, Tom and I, from even just not even nationality. I mean, an absolute monster of a player. Carried Arsenal through many matches in terms of single-handedly. I know that's often thrown away, that phrase, but Vieira was one of those players. Had absolutely everything, drove the team forward, and obviously 3 Premier League titles at Arsenal and a double in there as well. I mean that was the first no-brainer
for an unbeaten season. Not too bad.
Captain an unbeaten season. Yeah,
2 doubles. No,
do we need
2
doubles.
doubles.
2 doubles. Yeah, 02 and 98.
Doubles,
yeah, 2 doubles. Yeah. And yeah, I think that and the FA Cup.
You'd find someone hard pushed to disagree, wouldn't you? Like with Patrick Vieira. I guess.
No, I think he wasn't just phenomenal. He was kind of game changing, like in terms of the Premier League and stuff. I always remember his debut when he came on against Sheffield Wednesday. Ray Parlour was injured, and he just transformed the football match. And we just hadn't seen a guy like that. That helter of the Premier League. He would get the ball. He'd have 3 Sheffield Wednesday people on him, and he'd just move one way, shift the other, push the ball, and you're like, okay, this guy's got time on the football. He was just playing a different game.
He was a special player. My I think quite rightly, and we don't want to get sidetracked because we often easily can as Arsenal fans into a debate, but Thierry Henry is the best player for me that's ever played for the club. People always debate whether him or Bergkamp. That's up for personal opinion. But for me, Patrick Vieira through that period of success was our most important player by far. Like you said, I was in the East Stand for that 4-1 victory over. I think it's 4-1 against Sheffield Wednesday when he came on. And if you think about it, that was 1996. And then his last kick of the boot was a 2005 FA Cup final when we won against Man United. We didn't win a trophy for 9 years after that. No. And so that period of success completely mirrors. And yes, of course, that's Wenger's first decade, but the whole thing went for him. And we don't win another trophy for 9 years, and that's.
No, I agree 100%. And Wenger said, didn't he? He was my general, lead us into battle, and it was clear. Bergkamp and Henry were absolutely unbelievable, hugely important. But Vieira, for me, was the key to it all.
Absolutely. So we've got a couple of. The water carrier. The position was so good. They named the position after him. We got Claude Makelele in there. I think we feel we have to. Again, part of that Chelsea side which came and outrageously disrupted Arsenal's and United's sort of the tussle that they would have every season over the title. And with their back-to-back titles there, like you said, they named the position after him for a good few years. And I just think that he was the glue. I think he was a tremendously important player. Didn't want to do too much Arsenal bias and throw in Emmanuel Petit, although, I really was tempted. We went for Claude Makelele there, and obviously, success elsewhere as well. But a top player and I think that position in the last 15 years, almost because of him, has garnered so much more respect. And, the registrar, whatever you want to call it now, people understand the role that person plays on a football pitch. And whilst they won't deliver any fantasy football points for people who play FPL, apart from that, they're very important to the side. So we've gone Makelele there.
Fair enough. And, you talk about Arsenal struggling when Vieira left. Look at what happened to Real Madrid with their Galacticos and what have you. You take Makelele out and they're like, oh my goodness, suddenly the football team doesn't work. And you're right, but I would say if we're setting up an 11, Makelele and Vieira struggled a little bit as a partnership for us. And I know you gave a fleeting mention only of Emmanuel Petit. It was a hell of a duo, wasn't it, Vieira Petit?
It was phenomenal.
You mentioned, N'Golo Conte. Otherwise you play your 4 defensive midfielders, and then you just never concede a goal.
You don't, but it depends where you go up front and the people who might not track back. We might name a couple in a minute who are going to do so little going forward. So little tracking back that you just need to have that protection. No, I think you're right then. Petit, I think, would have been, for me, again, with that bias, I completely appreciate, almost a shoo-in had he not left Arsenal so quickly. It was a real shame for us as Arsenal fans. I think Barcelona didn't want him; they wanted Mark Overmars, and we kind of threw him in the deal. And it was a shame because actually, had he stayed another couple of years and been part of the sort of maybe the second double in 01-02 alongside Patrick Vieira, then I think you're looking at a partnership there could have really done special things. But obviously scored in the World Cup final and then helped us to that first double. He's not a bad player and certainly up there. But I did touch at the beginning of the midfielders about some of them that have not made the list. Someone like a Deschamps or a Dugarry or a Djorkaeff, people who only fleetingly spent their time in the Premier League. But it would have been nice to see a bit longer. Anyone stand out for you as someone who didn't spend long enough here to make our 11, but really would have done?
No, I mean, interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily have Dugarry as a midfielder. I know he did play quite deep when he was at Birmingham. Through his career, he's been more of a forward. But yeah, in terms of the impact, I mean, he had an unbelievable impact at Birmingham, and he was sort of towards the end of his career. But he's up there with Trevor Francis as like Birmingham's greatest ever player. He deserves a mention. Yuri Djorkaeff was fantastic for Bolton, but certainly not what you remember. If you look at his career overall. Don't know. You got unsigned. No, actually, I wasn't going to say that because it would be terrible to mention Stephen Nzonzi in the same breath as Vieira, Petit, and Makelele and stuff like that. But no, there must be loads. There must be loads that I'm not quite putting my finger on. But I mean, we've got a pretty phenomenal selection as it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we haven't stopped there with the defensive midfield. So in a three, joining Makelele and Vieira, we went for N'Golo Kanté. I mean, what we're going to do here, Matt, is we're going to sit Makelele in his typical role, and then we're going to have the marauding Kanté and Vieira bombing up and down the pitch, covering every blade of grass. Because the front three, there's so much flair there and quality. We thought, let's put Kanté in there as a three. Back-to-back league titles with two different clubs. Completely...
Andrew's presented a very strong and legitimate argument. The other argument is that we couldn't decide between the two of them. And I wanted to put N'Golo Kanté in there, and Andrew wanted to put Claude Makelele. And actually, we decided that, the two of them might actually work really well, especially if we had young Vieira and he was bombing on, and we sort of play slightly more as an 8, which he could do really well, actually. He could do very, very well when he wasn't sitting. For me, the reason Kanté still had to get into the 11 was because of the Leicester story is still one of the best stories that English football will ever see, let alone, has seen, it will ever see. And then to go directly into that Chelsea team and then win the title straight away, had to be in there for us. These are all also World Cup and Premier League winners. So
it's phenomenal what N'Golo Kanté's done. And actually, I think that trio, I think it could work. There's a bit of a misconception that N'Golo Kanté, was going to be the next Makelele, and they had, he was a defensive midfielder. And actually, even when he was playing at Caen before he joined Leicester, he was either playing, like you say, on the right side of a 3, which we're seeing him quite a lot at Chelsea doing these days under Lampard, or playing one of 2, like he did with Drinkwater so well at Leicester. So, he doesn't play as the one kind of guy sitting in front of the fence. And the times I've seen him as the most defensive player for France, it hasn't necessarily worked very well.
And you could even argue with Vieira alongside Gilberto. Gilberto was the screen in front of that back four, and Vieira was the marauding central midfield.
And Conte, Conte's game is all about his mobility, his running, the way he reads the game. So he's not a sitting player. He's got to just be moving all the time.
Both different in stature and physical size, but they could definitely do that similar role, couldn't they? Covering that blade of grass, tackles, interceptions, everywhere.
Absolutely. We're going to move up now to sort of the flair players. Again, I think there's options here, and there's a couple of names we're going to leave on the bench and get your thoughts over. The one I'll go for, because I'll let Andrew wax lyrical about one of his favourite players of all time. I'm going to go for Cantona. I don't think you can, you can go too far wrong. Sort of that 4 league titles. I think 5 if you count the Leeds title as well. Did the season before. Just a special. Enigmatic player. I think so important as well, not only in Man United and the success that 90s team had, because that was quite obvious as a talisman, but also in that birth of the Premier League as well, and actually as just sort of this global product with a stardom. I think very much part of that Sky Sports launch and era they had. You think about that upturned collar, you think about the Selhurst Park of kung fu kick, you think about everything that he meant to Premier League football at the time as well. And then that's not counting FA Cup winners. That's not counting, winning those 4 titles on the trot. So he had to be in there, I guess.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. A hugely important player in Premier League history. Like you say, he had the look, he had the strut and what, but he delivered, and he delivered in the big matches. Whether you talk about United struggling a bit in Europe during the Cantona era, but domestically they were unbelievable. I'll always remember the season when they reeled Newcastle in. I think Cantona had just come back from his ban, and it's just unbelievable. He got the winner at St James's Park, but there were a run of 5 or 6 games where he just popped up and just made the difference. And it was just, what a footballer, but like you say, personality as well, that helped launch the whole Premier League brand.
Absolutely. We had Ron Barton on the pod the other week, actually. Obviously that campaign came up again from a Newcastle perspective. And one of the things he didn't mention Eric as an individual, but he actually said that there was an element of the Newcastle, the lots of reasons are why was the lead thrown away, do you think, under Key? And he's like, one of the reasons was just not quite good enough in the moments that mattered. Actually, so you can look back and you can think about, but actually collectively, if they look around that dressing room, each of them didn't give the 2 or 3% that mattered. And there is a man that, for all the, Rasmus has around him in Cantona, actually did deliver. Because actually you could easily see that kind of personality now and actually not turning up on match day. Being that personality but not delivering. And actually he could kind of do both, which was fantastic. And obviously, like you say, a massive part of that title running. Absolutely.
Yeah. The front three is a bit of a weird one with the system, because I feel like my choice in a minute, who I don't know if we've got enough time to talk about, but playing either side of our lone striker, I'm not sure if it would work particularly. I mean, we'll get your thoughts on it, Matt. But any team selected by myself, whether it be Arsenal, France, whatever, there always has to be Robert Pires' name on the team sheet. And it's, for me, an absolute no-brainer. What an amazing player, an underrated player, in my opinion, considering how good he was. I always remember that image on the Highbury turf of the players clapping him and bowing him when he lifted that trophy in 2002. And the hurt that I was going through that day when he did his cruciates in that, I think it was the FA Cup tie against Newcastle.
Yeah.
2 Premier League trophies, over 60 Premier League goals. I think it was a top assist maker in that season in 2002. Integral to both of the 2002 and 2004 title winning sides. That bending finish into the far corner was just perfection. I'm going to say, is that a good shout, Matt? Because
Of course it is, and it's hard to argue with you. But we'll talk about other names as well, because there are some phenomenal names, and I've got a feeling David Ginola is not going to get in.
He's not going to get in, and he is definitely a firm place on our bench. But yeah. What a player!
Player was his player of the season, wasn't he? At Tottenham, but probably played his best football at Newcastle. But yeah, I mean, I love Pires, and he's in many ways kind of the opposite to Cantona in that maybe that's harsh to say Cantona seeks the limelight, but Pires is always, throughout his career, he's always liked to be in the support role, and he's always liked to be, and again, it's not putting him down to say sort of second best to Bergkamp or second best to Henry, but that's kind of where he's like to be, second best to Zidane or what have you. And what was a great shame in that 2002 season is that it was his moment for France, that World Cup, when Zidane was injured and Pires was player of the season in France, and then he did his knee. And he must look back at his career and think, wow, I've had an amazing career. But yeah, he could. I mean, he won the World Cup in '98 as a sort of substitute, but. Love him, and a real team player who showed that sort of mental and physical toughness that a lot of people thought he didn't have when he joined Arsenal.
Absolutely.
And
there's the famous story, isn't there, where he's sitting on the bench at Stadium of Light for his introduction to English football. I wanted to ask you, Matt, where does Pires rank in French football history in terms of midfielder? Because you mentioned Zidane, you've got Platini. Yeah. Like, where is Pires in that list?
Probably second, it sounds really awful, doesn't it? Like second tier, I was going to say, behind the sort of Zidane, Platini.
It's not a bad first tier, though, is it? So
no, it's not a bad
that's
first
the problem.
Tier. I mean, that's the thing. I've had the pleasure of working with Robert quite a lot, and he's and at one point I started going on about Dennis Bergkamp. Now I loved him, and he was my favourite player. And I thought, well, I'm saying that's Robert Pires. It's I say, oh, sorry, Robert. I really liked you. It's like, Matt. Dennis was the king, and it's like. There are a huge number of wonderful players France have had, and Pires is probably talked about in a similar vein to somebody like Djorkaeff, who is not perhaps as famous in England, or not. People don't quite realise how great a player he was as well. But France have been blessed with a lot. But Pires has huge respect, and because he won the World Cup in '98, and more importantly, played the pass to Trezeguet for the golden goal at Euro 2000, he'll always have that big part in France's folklore.
And another person with a big part up front, it's quite obviously Sylvain Wiltord. No, it's not. It's obviously Thierry Henry. And Sylvain Wiltord's obviously a great stalwart and an Arsenal hero. But no, we won't talk too much about Thierry Henry. Only to say, obviously, he was going to find a place in this team, wasn't he? As arguably the Premier League's best ever, let alone the best French striker. Like, if you narrow it that much, he's going to get in. Like,
you wonder. One question I always ask that we'll never know the answer to, but would it have been Anelka if he'd have stayed? And would Anelka today be France's record goal scorer? And I mean, stupid question to ask, because he went to Real Madrid and he kept changing clubs and he never kind of settled. But people in youth football, they say that Anelka always had a bit more talent than Henry, but Henry had that different kind of mentality.
And if you look at Anelka's achievements and stuff, Anelka will probably be someone who else finds our bench. It's a big bench. It's a pre-season tournament that we are going to have with the bench perspective. But no, Anelka was close, because you're right. I think I'm of an age where my first proper football following started about sort of 93, 94. Where I'm much sort of paying attention, and only two players have made me think, wow, at that young age, and that was for Arsenal, and that was Anelka and Fabregas when he broke through as well. But when Anelka broke through in that double winning season, and obviously we brought him in, that goal against Blackburn, I remember when he sort of rolled his foot over and then took it around the keeper and just pinged it in. He was so good, so young, very much like your Kylian Mbappe now. Do you mean that kind of level where you just go, he's got everything, he's 18, 19 years old. How is this possible? And it is interesting, there's not many, what shows you the talent he had is you look at his career and the trophies he won and the goals he scored, and yet lots of people still ask, did he underachieve? That's how much talent he had. And I think that's testament to how much talent he had, because you couldn't look at that trophy cabinet and accuse many players of underachieving when he's won as much as he's won. But it's an interesting one, but for obvious reasons. Thierry.
Thierry gets my vote for sure.
Won the lot.
A couple of players that didn't make the cut, obviously, in this massive subs bench. Although we're conforming with the new rules of the extra subs. We've got Louis Sahar. We thought about obviously spending a lot of time at Manchester United, Fulham, Everton, scoring over sort of around 80, 85 goals in the Premier League. Matt, very, very good striker in his day.
Really good, really accomplished striker, Louis Sahar. Probably underrated, I'd say. Always looked good enough when he played for France. Didn't play, there was huge competition, but he looked international class. He was technical. His finishing was outstanding. So useful guy to have on the bench, I'd say. Is he not making the bench?
Yes, he's on the bench.
He's on the bench.
Yeah.
It's an attacking bench. It's an attacking bench. It's an attacking bench. That's why he's playing potentially 6 defensive positions only, because he's the only defensive player who makes the bench.
Probably better off having Gallas on there for the versatility, but
well, quite.
And then there's Pogba's on the bench as well. The superstar Paul Pogba, obviously World Cup winner, but very in England. The reputation is
still not done it.
Of almost a bit of a flash in the pan, just turns up when he wants to. What are your thoughts on Pogba, Matt?
I like him. He was fantastic. Played a massive part in France winning the World Cup, but hasn't done it. I think he did it at Juventus. Well, he certainly did do it at Juventus. He looked the part there. And for whatever reason, whether it's been partly injuries, whether it's been because Man United is a difficult place, I think at the moment to play good football, to be kind of left in peace, to kind of under the same manager, to work on a project together. And there's always been something with him. There's always been an injury to stop his progress, or or Graham Souness to have some choice words, or I don't know. I think people are harsh on him, but I can understand the frustration because he hasn't yet delivered. But he's one that may make the team in 5 years. We'll have to see.
There was a sort of 20-minute spell when he came on, I think, against Spurs after the restart at Spurs. I think it was away at Spurs, and for 20-25 minutes he was just scary. It was almost like a training match. He was playing it like that, and it was just the passing. It was just phenomenal. And you get these glimpses, you just think, why can you not do this 90 minutes every week? You know,
I think that's the frustration, isn't it? Because you know, the athleticism, the
vision,
touch, the technique, the skill, the vision. Like he has
everything. People, you know, but I think people are harsh because they assume that it's because he doesn't want it. And he's got the kind of bling. I'm very cool. I've had, you know, I don't know the guy, but I've had sort of interviews with him post matches and stuff, and he's an amazingly charismatic and really intelligent guy. At the World Cup, I saw him giving interviews in English, French, Italian, and you're like, oh, this guy is, you know,
it's impressive.
And I don't know what he's like, you know, to go for a drink with. But I think he's an impressive guy, and I think the reputation he has is probably inaccurate.
And I think and it's unfair as well when some people say, oh, you know, why aren't you turning on every game? As if it's easy to be that level that he can hit it occasionally, but it's not easy to be that complete midfielder, is it? Otherwise,
no, and he'd like to be running football matches every week. It's not just that he can't go to run.
And I think what I would say is that, you know, he's still of an age where he could come into his best years if he gets in the right system and the right manager. I think, you know, what you're not looking at as a footballer that's 32 years old. You're looking at someone who's actually still got, arguably and hopefully, a good 4 or 5 years is very, very best stuff. So hopefully that'll be the way forward for Paul Pogba. And he might find a place in there, and he can displace one of the Makelele and N'Golo Kante. You know, he's got the talent too.
I mean, there's a Frenchman we haven't mentioned once yet, really, who would want to have your opinions really as well on the love affair between French football and the Premier League, Matt, and that since Arsene Wenger's arrival, you know, back in sort of '96, was he the catalyst for that love affair? Do you think, Matt?
Absolutely. And the Premier League was so different back in the '90s. Wenger was the first foreign manager to succeed. Joseph Venglos struggled at Aston Villa, and you know, the fact that Vieira arrived with Remy Gard just before Wenger even started, because Wenger was still seeing out his contract in Japan, but he obviously was behind the Vieira and Gard deals. It sent out this message as well when people thought, oh, hang on, so Arsene Wenger's coming and he's going to bring us players like Patrick Vieira. It just kind of opened people's eyes, I think, to what was happening in France, what was happening in other countries, and the French were most definitely ahead of the game in terms of player development. The training these kids were getting was absolutely phenomenal in France. So Wenger was a catalyst. Gerard Houllier didn't have so much success. We haven't talked about many of his, you know, Bernard Diomed and Bruno Cheyrou, even though they were good players. Bruno Cheyrou in particular, but didn't do it at Liverpool. But yeah, you know, we're close neighbours, aren't we? And the French absolutely love the Premier League. The French, you know, it's always been, you know, the biggest attraction for television stations to try to get the Premier League right. Obviously, Ligue 1 remains the most important, thankfully. But yeah, the Premier League is big because so many top French players are playing there, and they love seeing full stadiums. They love the pace of the football matches, and it's been it's become a bit of a problem for Ligue 1 because players do grow up just kind of waiting, hoping they'll get a move to the Premier League, and you don't get many top players. You don't get many top players who spend their whole career. It gets about as good as Sidney Govou, who was really good, but not quite good enough to get his move away, and he ended up staying at Lyon his whole career. But
well, I was going to say, did you see that changing? Because I think from the outside, it certainly, like you say, that fascination with French players or Ligue 1 fans looking at the Premier League, and it feels like it's been quite one way for quite a while. But now I feel a lot of British fans really taking an invested interest in French football. I think it's talked about a lot more, just in Punk's fandom, whether it's pub talk, whether it's terrace talk at Arsenal. People really enjoy watching Ligue 1 football now, and I think, you know, you could argue there still needs a bit of a more competition there, but nonetheless, is that just the fact that it's a globalized world and we can see more French football, or is there that can you genuinely see that, Paul, that French players are more likely to stay and actually more likely to attract top players from across Europe to the league as well?
I think the gap's closed maybe a little bit. Like financially, there's a massive TV deal in France now. There's still a huge gulf in terms of the wages that, you know, a Leicester City or an Aston Villa can offer compared to every club in France other than PSG. So you as long as there's that gulf in wages, it's going to be difficult. But I think people in the UK realise more and more that there is a hell of a lot of talent in France. I think winning the World Cup makes a big difference. I think Kylian Mbappe is making a big difference as well, because he's in his 5th season now in Ligue 1. He's won 4 league titles, and he's the most sought after player on the planet. So that's big, and it sends out a message to younger players in France.
Yeah, Camavinga's a man that we've mentioned before on this pod. Is he a player that Ligue 1's going to retain?
He is phenomenal. This guy is 7. It's just one of those. I remember Mbappe when he was 17. You couldn't really quite believe it, but this guy's playing central midfield, and he's bullying other players, and he's got everything. Actually, last season he started playing for Rennes when he was 16, sort of in a defensive midfield role. This season he's kind of playing in more of a number 8 role, and you're like, whoa! Suddenly he's box to box, and he's got these skills. He's already been capped by France. He is the most exciting talent I've seen in France. He's very much in the bracket of Mbappe and Eden Hazard. I remember when he was 16, 17 and came through. And the difference is what I was talking to some people about. The difference is the position, because sometimes you get a forward who break through at 17, like, whoa, he's talented. But this guy is playing with maturity in central midfield that is just
cultured
really
left foot,
unseen.
Yeah. Brilliant stuff. Well, we really appreciate you joining us.
Pleasure, guys.
Evening. Yeah, absolutely. Enjoy the football this weekend.
Thank you.
Take care.
Hope to speak to you soon. Take care.
Will do. Cheers, fellas.
Thanks,
you.
Matt. Appreciate it.
So Tom and I come out of this episode unscathed in the changing room. Thanks again to Matt Spiro for his assessment on our French 11. Feel free to tweet us your comments about the episode and our selection, or yours, at HTO Football. Hope you enjoyed the episode, guys. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.